We've done this over 1,000 times at about 325 or so companies in 2.5 years. This has been during a downturn in the tech space in a really hard market. In this type of role, which is mostly BDRs, right? The attrition rate's about 40%. The average time to become an account executive is about 18 months. Across 1,000 plus people, we've seen an attrition rate under 5% and an average time to promotion of 9 months compared to 18 months. Whatever we're doing is absolutely working.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenly, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a phenomenal interview ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days like today, we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Some days we open up for Q&A, and occasionally you get a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. Now, as a reminder, if you like the content that we're sharing here on the show, make sure that you subscribe for more. All right, today's interview. About a month ago, I came across a LinkedIn post of a well-known tech founder, and they shared the following story. Not a criticism, just an observation. I interviewed 4 Bay Area MBA students this year, 2 for marketing and 2 for investing. I would have interviewed more, but none of the rest put in enough effort during email screenings. Of the 2 marketing, both were wicked smart, both got essentially a soft offer, but then opted out even with no better offers. They both said they didn't want to work as hard as we work. So I commented back, said, if MBA is a requirement, find the MBA who also has an athletic or a military background, as those 2 groups often have the tenacity that they were looking for. And also, if I was really being honest, I'd probably take one of those backgrounds over an MBA for most tech roles any day, as they're 10 times more likely to possess the trait that they were looking for. And that's where today's guest joined the conversation to validate this statement that I honestly thought I would never be able to quantitatively get done. And so today we have JR Butler, founder and CEO of Shift Group, where they help bridge the gap between military veterans, former athletes, and the business world through coaching and career upskilling with a mission to help these individuals unlock their unique skills and experiences and match them with top-tier companies in need of resilient, coachable, and team-oriented professionals. So JR, welcome to the show.
Dude, thanks for having me. I love the back and forth in those comments, and I've been looking forward to this conversation since then. So pumped to be here.
Oh, yes. So, all right. You and I were talking before, Matt is a former college athlete. I'm a former college athlete. We've always just seen this trend of people who have these, and it's not exclusive to it, obviously, but we've just noticed this trend where we see this in former high-level athletes, former military operators, and you were able to validate some of this. So I guess first, if you just want to explain your background, where you started to pick up on this, what you all are doing at Shift Group, and then we'll dive in some more.
Absolutely. So my background, I was an athlete myself, and I grew up kind of my grandfather served in the military. That's the connection to the veteran community. I'm from a part of Massachusetts where a lot of my friends enlisted. So I played Division I college hockey. Both my brothers also played college hockey, and my father is a Hall of Fame high school hockey coach here in Massachusetts. I got out of school in 2008 with a sociology degree and a minor in art history and sign language. So I wasn't exactly fighting the job offers off, Sam. So honestly, like most people, I kind of tripped and fell into a sales career. And a couple things I noticed for me, right? I'll talk about me and then I'll talk about what I started to notice over time. But there were certain things about the career that checked boxes that I didn't even know I wanted. Things like the fact that there's a scoreboard, there's black and white success, and it's a meritocracy. These were things that I didn't realize I appreciated about being an athlete, where it's like, hey, if you win or lose, there's no gray area, and you know where you stand, and the harder you work, the more success you'll have, right? So I literally went in my 3rd day at my company. My first job, I was a BDR, obviously, at a reseller. And I went into my boss's office on the 3rd day and I said, hey, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And again, this is selling pretty complex technology solutions to really big companies. That wasn't what it was about for me. It was about like the environment of being in the business world and having these things that I didn't realize I had really missed as an athlete. Had a great career, 16 years, both as an IC, and was fortunate to join an early stage startup in Boston right after a Series A. And Boston is like the educational capital of the world, right? And we raised like 5 rounds, 150 million bucks from like really good VCs, including Iconic Capital, which is Zuckerberg's like RIA. And because of that, we attracted a lot of local talent, Harvard, Boston College, Northeastern University. And we would get these like 4.0 kids, right, that spent 4 years in the library, and we would hire them as BDRs. And then ultimately what would happen is more than 50% of the time they would spend, less than a quarter cold calling and be like, this sucks. I don't want to do it. I'm going to go back to get my MBA, or I'm going to go go to law school, or I'm going to go, do something else that isn't this hard and this shitty, basically. So I kind of had this epiphany where it's like, GPA doesn't necessarily indicate success, at least not in this path. So I had a conversation with my internal team and I said, hey, listen, I can teach someone how to cold call. I can teach someone how to write an email, do discovery. Like, these skills are things that you have to do to learn, and we can teach that. I can't teach someone how to be resilient. I can't teach someone how to be competitive and driven by this scoreboard we have up in our office. And I certainly can't teach someone to be coachable. So those are the characteristics that I want you to start looking for. Don't look at the college they went to. Don't look at their pedigree, their GPA. Look for people that played sports. Look for people that served in the military, because there's a high probability that they have those things, and we don't have to risk trying to figure that out in an interview process. So we started to do that. We started to see our attrition rate come down. We started to see our productivity and our ramp time go faster. And that was I became a VP there. We were acquired by IBM for $2 billion. But like, this was kind of the combination of my experience leaving uniform and building teams is kind of where Shift Group started to like bang around in my head a little bit.
And that's so crazy, because so many recruiters are constantly looking for like these soft skills, the things that never show up. Like, you can say team player, like hard worker, but oftentimes you get in the interview that person, you're just like, I'm not picking up on that vibe.
Yeah.
And so many of the people that possess that, come from the team background, are very humble. They're not the person that recognizes, we won a championship, but it wasn't because of me. I didn't carry the team. It was the full team effort. So I don't know, for some of us, it's almost the teamwork is an inferred thing that you have to be good at it. Why would I put that on a resume if I know that I'm going to be working at a company where it's required? That's not something that helps me stand out or differentiate.
Totally. Yeah. 100%.
Okay. So you started Shift Group then, and you followed this. It's not even a hypothesis. It's been validated at that point that you saw this with the individuals that you hired. So tell me about, what you all been up to at Shift Group so far, and how you're specifically working with this group.
So when I first started the company, the way I did it was I cold called like when you work at a university, universities have to have their staff directories public, right? So this is kind of a trick I learned early in my BDR career to get meetings. This is like pre-Zoom Info and all the other data providers is like, well, if I call on colleges, those numbers are easy to find. So I kind of called back to my BDR days, and I started calling coaches, and I told them like, hey, here's my background. I'm a former VP of sales, former CRO. I played hockey at Holy Cross. And I started with a lot of hockey coaches because I have a brother that played in the Olympics and the NHL. So like my dad is pretty well known. So I knew they were going to at least recognize my name. And I told them like, hey, send me your seniors and I'll help them get a job and I won't charge them any money. And they were kind of like, half of them were like, click, like, no way, too good to be true. But the ones who it resonated with started sending me people. And then I used my kind of network on the hiring partner side, people that have kind of grew up either working for me or with me. And I called them and told them like, hey, here's my idea. I'm going to take athletes. It was just athletes to start with. I'm going to train him on all the stuff that I know from 17 years of, go-to-market leadership. And then I'm going to introduce him to you. And if you hire him, pay me like 20% of their base, like we used to pay recruiters. And they were like, okay, like let's try it out. And that's kind of how the company started, dude. Like literally kind of using my own network. And then what I started doing was posting on Indeed athletes looking for sales jobs. And and then I would call those kids and tell them like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Half of them would say, no thanks. And the other half would do it. And I would literally nights, weekends, whatever it took, I'd get on Zoom, show them how to do a resume, explain the career, get them excited, talk about cold calling and cold emailing and da-da-da-da-da. And that's how we kind of grew the business. And this was like first half of 2022, Sam, when it was like you needed a heartbeat, you could get a job, right? But we started to scale the business and we took a lot of the training. We built an LMS, so we started training them. And now what we have now is, the team's like 25 people. We don't just do tech sales anymore. We can get them, we're still very sales focused, but expanding, but we can get them med device, pharmaceutical, wealth management, any type of kind of sales, real estate, any type of sales role. They have to go through like 20 hours of training. And then on the other side of our LMS is essentially like a recruiting portal. So like we can have a VP of sales can log in. You can watch like a Navy SEAL do a cold call before you decide if you want to interview him. You can watch a former, Division I soccer player present their 30, 60, 90 on video, tell their story, explain why they want to do sales, why they're a good fit for it. And you can do that in a couple minutes and then decide like, do I want to interview this person? So we're trying to kind of fix both sides of this transition. And like, especially early career talent is so hard to judge, man.
I'm with you. And people want to invest. They want to find that diamond in the rough. And because they always like, people are so glad when they see it pan out, this person shoots through the ranks. They're just like, this is one person that like, not only do you get that fulfillment of I helped craft this incredible career for them, but I also got this person that grew, like was just hungry, ambitious, wanted to learn, and they were able to grow within their ranks and just take on more responsibility than if we try to bring in someone from the outside at 3 times their pay who had done it before, but were they still hungry and wanting to do it? That's always the unsure part.
Yeah, it's honestly like getting early career talent hiring right, especially for, venture-backed early stage companies is such a cheat code for like sustainability and long-term success. I don't think a lot of people appreciate it because of the last like 6 or 7 years of a zero interest rate environment, how much of a business case there is to get that right. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Oh yeah. So, and I think that a lot lies into people do experience-based recruitment so often. Like I want somebody who has 5 years of experience in SaaS. They've had a BDR role. They've done this or that. Whereas this is much more behavioral skills based. So what are you, without giving away all your secrets and everything, like how are you identifying these people? Like what other traits are you finding other than, seeing for like previous athletic background, previous military background? How are you picking up on those little nuances that are the difference between phenomenal hires and good hires?
Well, I think, we're cheating a little bit in the sense that like, we still don't charge individuals. We have like paid agreements with a lot of athletic departments and some government like Department of Defense stuff. But for like a kid that finds us for free, to your point, like not all of these folks are going to be really good, right? Even if they served or they played sports at a high level. So one thing we do is they have to do the training. So that's kind of like just like a work ethic effort type of measurement, which by the way is super valuable for our customer, I think, because it's easy to apply to a job online, right? So that's one. The second thing, and I don't think I'm giving anything away here, but we before we get into anything about your career, before we start training you on these tactical skills, we do this like deep introspection, self-discovery exercise, because my experience tells me like I'm like anti-personality test, right? Because I've worked with salespeople that are introverts. I've worked with salespeople that are extroverts, and I've seen every role with different type of personality types. The one thing that every successful person I've ever worked with in my career, and when I'm feeling really good and I'm like on the right path, there's three things that are true. Number one is like I know what I stand for, and like I know who I am, so I can be authentic. Like I know my personal values. I know what my priorities and goals are, right? Like, and then the third thing is, do I have like the right mindset to go and get that thing? So that's what we do before we talk about any job search, career path, tactical skill. We force these folks to look in the mirror and think about what are your personal values, what are your priorities and goals, and where are you? And we have like an actual scientifically backed mindset assessment that we do that shows us where the kid and the candidate, where they are on like vision and purpose and, self-confidence and fears and like, decision making and all these like things. Because if you get those three things right, you could be the biggest introvert. But if your personal values and your priorities are like, I want to make a lot of money, I want to build companies, like you're going to be successful, especially with this background. So I think more than anything, that's like our secret ingredient is like this unlocking mechanism that brings out what makes these types of people like you and me really special people.
Yeah, I like that. And knowing a lot of these are sales roles, startups, this is a part of recruiting that I think so many people gloss over you have to match. It's not just finding a good candidate, finding a company you have to place for, but it's that matchmaking ability, finding the right person for the right fit at the company in those roles. That's where it's the exponential just impact that they can make. But so many people are just doing one or the other. They're not fitting those puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. And it's by the way, it's not just the impact on the organization, it's the impact on the human being, right? Because what happens a lot, and I'm sure you can appreciate, we get like, we're knee deep in Gen Z student athletes coming out of college. We do a lot of pro and veteran stuff, but I'd say a big chunk of who we're serving are recent graduates, and they come out and we make them rank their priorities from a career perspective. So think like location, salary and compensation, work-life balance, stress, flexibility, like all the things you actually, they don't tell you in college, like, hey, you're going to have to make trade-offs. Like you can't make $1 million and have work-life balance. Like, no, right? So we ask them a question, how much do you want a W-2 in 3 years? Never once, 600 kids a month, have we gotten below $250,000 as the answer. And then they choose like HR, right? So it's like, you want to make 250 grand in 3 years. You want to work in HR and you want to work remote from your living room. That's when we get to have a conversation that our coaches love to say, well, no offense, man, but if you want to make that much money in 3 years and work in HR, you're going to also have to sell drugs on the side because that's the only way you're going to do it, right? So like it's really somebody telling these kids the truth about the trade-offs you make in a living, like when you choose your living. And I think helping them understand that at this age is so valuable, man. Like, I don't think a lot of us get that coming out of college. You know what I mean?
No. And I still remember, God, I hated accounting class and finance class in college, but we had to do an exercise. It was just personal finance budgeting. It was like second week of it. And our accountant professor asked us, she said, okay, what type of role do you want? What do you want like when you graduate? And now start mapping out your anticipated expenses, what you think you're going to make for salary, all of that stuff. And I remember my naive self at the time. I'm like, I'm going to hop out of college. I'm going to have a $75K job. This is early 2010s. I'm going to have an Audi A4 that I'm going to drive. I'll be an assistant soccer coach on the side. And she on the paper just writes, you need to ground yourself a little bit more in reality. Like go do some more research on what you think you'll actually get as your first year out of college. And it was a wake up call because it was like, sometimes you need those people to just say, it's not all this just like fluffy end game. Like you have to put in the work. You have to start at the bottom. I think it makes you appreciate it more when you do get to there. But there is this, I don't know what it is, something about our society, like as we go through high school and college where someone just needs to reality check us a little bit. And when that happens, that's when, the lights finally come on and you get it. But if you don't have that, that's where the disconnect comes and why you see some of these just company expectations, employee expectations not matching up with the recent grads.
I think it's we could talk all day about like some of the institutional failure that exists in our country. But like, I think generally colleges aren't incentivized to tell a kid the truth, because it's like, hey, we're going to charge you, whatever, 150 grand here for the next 4 years, and you're probably going to be paying for it for the next 20. They can't say that, right? They want you to feel like it's going to be like a clear ROI. So it's really on us that have been through it, I think, to communicate that. We can't rely on those institutions to tell the truth.
Yeah, that's so true. So, all right, you're having these reality talks with the different individuals. You've kind of talked about your sourcing pools and everything else. So tell me about, I guess it's almost like an apprenticeship in a way, where you're helping to bridge this. And I feel like that's another missing piece, where sometimes you'll have recruiters saying, I don't want to over prepare my candidates for the role. I can't give them all the questions. I can't do all that. That's cheating or anything else. But I mean, I think that's recruitment, that's guidance. So tell me about your approach and how you're taking that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, I just shit on college. Now I'm going to like give it a little tire pump. Like I believe the value of college is learning how to learn, right? So the way we think about preparation, we do the tactical stuff, like teach them how to do the job, how to make a list, how to research an account, how to write an email, how to make a cold call, do discovery. From an interview perspective, we teach them, to your point, we don't prepare them for that interview necessarily, but in order for them to get an interview through our hiring partner, they have to finish our interview prep curriculum, which is teaching them how to prepare, right? Like, so we're guiding them to water. Ultimately, we still have, every now and then we get a call from, a leader that says this kid was like unprepared, but it's so rare compared to like what I've experienced. Like, it was basically like when I was a, VP of sales in a CRO, I'd say 80%, 75% of the kids would ask me questions they could Google. And that's like one of our guiding points, is like, don't ask a question you can Google. Like, read a case study and come up with something thoughtful that you're actually curious about, right? So we teach this idea of like, authentic empathy, authentic curiosity, things that you actually, so putting them in again, going back to that mindset, like what's the right mindset going into an interview versus, hey, they're going to ask you these 10 questions, or you need to ask these 10 questions. Like, this is how you need to be thinking about this process, and give them like kind of like an idea of what that person on the other side of the phone is thinking.
I love that. And in the days of easy apply, I can go and apply. During this conversation, I could have applied to 100 jobs on LinkedIn. Like, click a button. It's stupid now. But you're talking about, these are people who are choosing to enroll with you and take this course. So tell me about what are the outcomes that you all are seeing that are getting people to say, I'm willing to put in the work because I know that the outcome will be worth it if I go through these steps?
Yeah, it's funny, because I think in that back and forth, Jason made a comment like, oh, it's, years ago it was 10x better. Now it's only 2x better. What we're seeing is about a 50% attrition in our program. And I would say there's two things driving that. One, I'm okay with. If a kid doesn't want to do sales, we're not a really good fit right now. That's right now. Eventually we will be. You can get any first job you want through us. For now, I'm okay losing those people. But there's a percentage of those people that see what we expect them, because we set those expectations, and they're like, I don't want to do this. I just want to apply online. And that's actually okay. Good luck, right? Like, it's kind of like, now from an outcomes perspective, and I know I talked about this in the comments, but we've done this over 1,000 times, Sam, at about 325 or so companies in 2.5 years, where this has been during a downturn in the tech space, in a really hard market. And in this type of role, which is mostly BDRs, right? The attrition rate's about 40%. The average time to become an account executive is about 18 months. Across 1,000 plus people, we've seen an attrition rate under 5% and an average time to promotion of 9 months compared to 18 months. So whatever we're doing is absolutely working. And now we just need to figure out, like, how can we get that type of return if we're placing marketing people or HR or accounting or all these other careers. But we did it, in my opinion, we did it in the hardest kind of first job. So that's a pretty good indicator of where we're headed.
Yeah, and like you, I started as a BDR. I remember those are long months when you're going through that. And yeah, if you're driven, you want to blow your numbers out so you can get through it as quickly as possible onto the next thing. So before you had all these hard numbers, like how were you presenting these candidates to hiring managers? How are you pitching your services to get people to see this vision? And what, obviously the results are now speaking for themselves, but how are you going about this? Because it is a little bit of a different approach, and that it's not just like, here's a resume, what do you think? Like you are having to take a different approach with it.
Yeah, I'll be honest in that answer is I looked for guys like you that were in hiring roles, right? Like, it's a pretty easy conversation if you're talking to a VP of sales that served in the military or played sports at the college level. They kind of intrinsically get it. So I would probably say, like, if I look at our first like 50 placements, all the leadership at those companies were former athletes and veterans. Now we've since had to pivot from there. We've got big publicly traded companies. Now you're getting into, and you can appreciate this, selling to talent acquisition in HR, and you're selling Easy Pass to toll collectors a little bit. One of our strengths is actually diversity. Because if you look at the population of NCAA, you're talking about 50% of those people are females. And you look at certain sports like basketball, soccer, football, you're talking about 60, 70% of that population is from underrepresented backgrounds. So it's kind of a combination of like somebody who gets the intangibles, and then if they don't get that, we have to sell the training, the attrition rate in our program, and we have to sell the diversity. That's kind of the basic sales pitch, pre having the data.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. And it's something that, it's funny, I've had these conversations with friends, family, peers, colleagues, where the D&I conversation of it, and so many people, I don't know if it's news coverage or what, but I'm looking at people, I'm just like, I don't care your race, your nationality, your color, your gender, any of that. Like, I look for, do you have this kind of mindset? Are you going to be successful? And I think that's what I love about the athlete and military pool is they don't care about that either. Are you the best person on the field, or do you want to be? We're going to get you in the spot. And that's where this translates so well to the organization is it gets past that conversation of hitting quota numbers or anything. It's like, no, you're going to love this person no matter where they come from or what their background is.
Exactly. 100%. And it's also like a little bit of diversity of thought, which I don't think people appreciate. That's really what's super important. Like, hiring a 32-year-old Marine veteran from Mississippi, it's going to be a little bit different than your coastal, like, high pedigree college student, right? Like, they're going to have a different view of the world that, by the way, is going to align with a lot of your customers, right? Like, a lot of your customers aren't necessarily going to be the coastal college grad. You know what I'm saying?
I like that. So, okay. Let's go to the flip side of that now. That's how you pitched them. That's how you've sold. What had been objections that you had received when you're reaching out to managers, to organizations about these candidates?
I think right now, as we're in like we're still in kind of our sweet spot is still like down the middle of plate is entry level. People are hesitant to spend money on that from a recruiter perspective, right? And those are the people that don't get that long-term sustainability and ROI that you can get from getting this position, right? So it's kind of like, why would we pay somebody when we can, especially like we run into it, we don't get a lot of pushback right now from companies that are hiring in-office roles. They're struggling to find 23 to 26-year-olds that are willing to go in an office. That we don't run into a lot of objections because we're communicating to our people like, hey, you need to get in the office, like especially early on in your career. The companies that we talk to that hire remote BDRs, every objection is, well, we did a job posting for this BDR role last week and we got 1,000 applications. Why would we use you? And my answer is, well, what are you going to do with 1,000 applications? Walk me through your process. Now you're starting to, and they don't want to admit that it's going to be a bunch of man hours going through these resumes. And what are you looking for to decide who's going to move forward? And you're going to take a sales leader off the sales floor to interview somebody, like what's the process going to be to make sure that's a qualified conversation, right? These are the objections we're running into, is like, why would we spend money on this type of role? And because it's not a high impact role like a VP, or some of these kind of retained searches that we're paying for. We can find these people ourselves, and it's easy for us to get to source, right? But it's all about, like, what is the source, guys? Like you said, it's an easy apply button on LinkedIn. That's not a great source.
Yeah. And that's what always blows my mind. People don't look at the trade-offs of it. So it's like, yeah, you can get 1,000, I don't even want to call them qualified candidates yet. You can get 1,000 candidates over here. It's going to take you, to be gracious, 10 hours to just sift through those 1,000 candidates to even get to, okay, who's on your long list of that? Who do you even want to start to think about evaluating? Versus what if you spent 10 hours to just proactively source, or to use an organization like you? Like,
exactly.
I guarantee you that time spent is going to get so many more qualified people, and you're going to get further down the funnel in that time. But it's what looks or appears harder. People aren't willing to look at that from a more logical lens. They're just seeing it like, which is easier. And that's the path that I want to go.
Exactly. You're nail on the head, dude.
So it's a fun time for that. But no, other than that, I mean, any other just stories, experiences, things that you wanna get into just about the power of this group? How, I mean, we have plenty of recruiters who listen to this who may not already be focusing on this group, may not even thought about them before, without pulling away your pool and following your program. Like, anything else that you would recommend that they think about or explore as part of how they go about their roles?
Yeah, I think, like, you said something that I didn't emphasize that I want to emphasize, which is, in 2024 we live in a pretty, like, kind of selfish, individualistic society, right? Where kind of everybody's out for number one. And when you're at an organization like the best companies in the world, when you look at how they actually operate under the covers, there's a mindset there of like customer centricity, right? Like always putting the customer first. And then the second guideline for great companies is, I'm going to make a decision based off what's best for the company. Then I'm going to make a decision for what's best for my team. Then I'll use, like, what's best for me, right? And I think the thing that recruiters and hiring managers need to think about as they're building an organization that they want to win is, how do you uncover somebody that is going to always put the team first and the company first? And I think it's harder than ever now to identify that type of talent. And I think that is probably the biggest silver bullet that you solve for when you look at somebody that wore a uniform and played for the name on the front of their jersey more than they played for the name on the back of their jersey. And that goes for, of course, athletes, but also the military. If somebody made the sacrifices it takes to defend our country, you can tell they're okay putting themselves in the back seat, full stop.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, something we talk about in this podcast all the time. It's a long-term versus short-term mindset. Like, a hiring is such a, I don't know, it drives me crazy when people just take such a short-sighted approach to it. Like, oh, I'm not going to pay 20% fee to bring in someone who I know is going to be far and away better than someone that I can pick up on an easy apply. And no harm. They're great hires that you can make on inbound recruiting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that there, but people, like, this is your biggest investment, is the people. And not only like how much you're paying them, but what is the potential return on them long-term, not just this quarter, this year, over the next 3 years, 5 years, if you groom them properly. It's crazy when you think about, like, oh, if I'd just been willing to put up $2,000 more per year for this person who's a BDR, who's now a VP of sales at a Fortune 100 company 5 years later.
100%, man. 100%.
Like, those are the things where if you can identify those qualities and those candidates early on, like you're doing right here, the diamonds in the rough, like, that is an investment I will make time and time again, because it's almost always going to work in your favor.
Amen, man. Well said.
All right, JR. Well, this was fun. This was, as I said, it was validating for myself. So selfishly, I love this conversation. Before we get into the final, like, outro wrap up, like, anything that you want to share about you, about Shift, where people can find you, learn from you, and just any parting things there?
Yeah, I think one of my core values is that candor is kindness. So and that shows up for me on LinkedIn. So I'm a good follow on LinkedIn. I'm not shy about telling people when they're wrong. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, or, if you're an athlete, a veteran, or, you're looking to build a team first sales organization, you can find us at shiftgroup.io. Sam, I love what you guys are doing, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. This was awesome.
Yeah, likewise. So, hey, maybe part 2 sometime. We'll see. So, all right, JR. Well, thank you. As I said, I got to learn a ton with this. I know that our listeners are going to as well. So hopefully they can start to think about ways that they can incorporate this in their day-to-day moving forward.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. Well, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you love this episode, which I know you did, and you're not sure where to go next, we got a link to a similar one. You can find that in the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website. Full video episodes are available on YouTube if you'd like the video version of things. If you ever have questions, send them to us, podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, final request, if you did enjoy this episode, make sure that you leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It's only going to take you 3 seconds, but it's going to help other recruiters like you to find us. So, all right, everyone, that's the show. As promised, that was a phenomenal episode with JR Butler. Until next time, bye, y'all.